Outlast 2, that is a game that came out, and I was super excited about it. I was pumped. I was ready. I was a huge fan of the original game, so much so that I played it through, I think 13, 14 times, somewhere around there. A couple times on Nightmare difficulty, where you only have like one battery at a time. You gotta go through whole sections of the game that you wouldn't normally, in pitch black, because you have no batteries and you have to save it. I loved the original Outlast. I loved the DLC. I loved every part about it. I thought it was edgy, but not overly gratuitous. I thought that parts of it were balanced so well. I thought that the game made sense of the whole ludonarrative dissonance between the protagonist not being able to fight back and the idea that a normal person would fight back. There was a lot that made sense in the game, and it was the original game in a franchise, in a series, and so I was willing to forgive it for its faults that it did have. Then the sequel came out, and when they announced the sequel, I was expecting a game that embraced the good parts of Outlast 2, or of the original Outlast, but got rid and shed the bad parts of the original, such as the glaring ludonarrative dissonance between the narrative, which said that this person's trying to kill you, and the gameplay, which said that you couldn't fight back. You couldn't even pick up this stick that's there, or this shovel that's right there, or in some cases even a pocket knife that somebody stabbed you, something like that. You couldn't even do that. You couldn't fight back in any capacity. And I get that it's a sort of gimmick of Outlast that you can't fight back, and of so many horror games. But I think that there's a way to do it properly that makes sense. And I thought parts of the original Outlast did it in that way, and we'll address those as we go through. But this video is meant to serve as, it's kind of a series I do now, the long-winded review, where I talk to you. We don't have a script. I just one-on-one, we talk, I get it out there. You offer your thoughts down below. We can respond. If you want to get on my Discord, it's back there, actually. People are talking to me right now. It's great, but we're going to try to have this discussion. I want to just get everything out there. And just share my thoughts right off the dome, because I think that that's a lot more natural, and I won't cut parts of my thoughts out just because I have to write it down or script it. Now, the goal of this video is to explain why I think Outlast 2 falls so short of what I expected it. And I hope to be able to do that. Now, Outlast 2, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail as to the narrative, because if you do want to play the game, even after this video, then I want it to be natural to you. I want you to experience it as the developer intended you to experience it, but I will give a brief rundown of how the game mainly functions and where it's set. So you're set, basically, you and your cheeky poo. You're in a helicopter, you're filming this sort of documentary. It's kind of cute, kind of cool. The lip sync is horrendous, so bad, like, so bad. It makes Mass Effect Andromeda look well done. The graphics are beautiful, but the lip sync constantly pulled me out. It was one of the main reasons why I was like, this game is so beautiful, it's gorgeous, and then I got to the lip sync and I was like, oh my gosh, that's real bad. Now, I was playing it on a 1070 Founders Edition, overclocked to basically a 1080, and I was blasting it. We were getting great frame rates. It runs beautifully, looks great. The water effects are incredible, some of the best I've ever seen, but the lip sync really did pull me out. Anyway, the narrative, we were going through, and then all of a sudden this helicopter crashes, you crash and you fall, and you have to go find your wife. And as I've said previously, there's moments that this game embraces the video camera. And that was a big part of the original Outlast, that you had this video camera and the night vision allowed you to see. However, it was always recording. It was always recording. In this game, they try to make you actually consciously film stuff. So as you go through the game, right as the opening of the game starts, the helicopter is crashed and on fire. You don't know where your wife is. She could be down there burning alive. She could be down there choking on the fumes. But no, you, instead of racing down there, you stop and you hold up the video camera and you just stare and wait for the little red ring to fill up. And then you go down there and you check it out, because you have to, of course, have this footage recorded. And then you go into a menu, you tab it up, and then you check it out, and there's a little voiceover over that to explain kind of what's going on. And that is something that's kind of necessary as you go through the game to understand the narrative. They expect you to be recording stuff and to listen to the voiceovers. And I suppose that that's a fair thing to expect, but the problem is that it slows the game down so much, and it completely ruins the immersion, because if I'm trying to put myself in that space, as I usually do when I play these types of games, I try to become the protagonist, because I think that's how you can really enjoy horror games, is if you put yourself in that state. And as I'm playing through Outlast 2, there's many, many, many moments where I am caught saying, like, why am I doing this? Why do I have to do this? My wife could be getting murdered in there, and probably is, or getting raped or something, or probably is. And I have to stand here and film a wall so that I can understand what the hell is happening. I don't care what the hell is happening. I want to save my wife. And it's one of the difficulties of doing a game like this or having a narrative like this. Fallout 4 ran into the same issue, where they set up this desperate sort of context to the story, where your son has been kidnapped. You need to find him. Okay, that's a desperate thing. I'm going to sprint everywhere trying to find my son. But that's not how you enjoy the game. The game is going to rush by, and you're not going to explore. You're not going to do what they want you to do. You're not going to enjoy it because you immerse yourself in the game. And so the game almost requires you to be unimmersed and to not really enjoy really get involved with the story. And Outlast 2 suffers from the exact same thing, where I would rush through most of these cases, most of these instances. I would grab a pickaxe. Early on in the game, you come across a dead carcass of a horse or a cow or something. I don't remember what it was, but it was a big animal, and any reasonable person would pull the shovel or pull the hay fork out of the body and use it as a weapon, because you hear all these crazy people. You see dead bodies all around. One of the first things you see is the captain of, and the freaking operator, the navigator, whatever he is, the pilot, that's the word. The pilot of the helicopter you were flying, you see him skinned alive. I would very quickly pick up that hay fork and walk around with it, go full Satan and be like, this is my pitchfork, come at me, bro. That's what I would do, and I would stab anybody that came near me. You can't do that in this game. Any reasonable person would do it. Can't do it in this game. And that's fine. Again, it's sort of the gimmick, but there has to be a reason, or at least some sort of explanation, if I'm going to try and be immersed. Because all I'm saying in my head is, why aren't you hitting him? Any reasonable person, if I get choked, I'm going to try to gouge your eyes out. I'm going to try to punch you. I'm going to slap you. Even if I'm not consciously doing it, it's a reasonable, rational thing to do. But there's this ludonarrative dissonance between the narrative and the gameplay, where the gameplay requires you to be a pacifist that doesn't do anything, that doesn't act human, whereas the narrative would require you to do anything else. And the voice acting is pretty well done. The protagonist's voice acting is a little shallow. But the narrative would require you to do that, but the gameplay doesn't allow you to do that. And there's, of course, other elements, such as the running mechanics. You can jump over some scripted elements that are like 2 feet high, little knocked over barrels. But other elements, like a broken down fence that's 1.5 feet high, you can't just sidestep over it. That seems a little broken. Even if it's in the middle of a level and it isn't a barrier to the level, you still can't do anything with it. You can't knock barrels over as a reasonable person would do. If you're running through a short corridor and all of a sudden there's a crazy woman, he, she, father, mother chasing you, you would knock over the barrel to keep them from getting to you and to trip them up. But no, you can't do that. No, of course, a reasonable person would do it, but you can't do it. All you can do is film it and turn around and kind of glance, and that's it. That's it. And I understand why they did this. They did this to instill a sense of hopelessness in the player, a sort of lack of power and impotence to you. The fact that you are hopeless in this case, you just have to try to escape. I understand that, and I'm going to take my hoodie off now because it's getting hot with these lights. I understand that. I understand what they're saying. The problem is that this can be done well without basically tying your hands behind your back and going neener, neener, neener. You can't. There's a way to do it, and we saw it in Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 did it very, very well. If you haven't played that game, I highly recommend that you do, especially if you're looking for a horror game and you're trying to debate between Outlast 2 and Resident Evil 7. I highly recommend Resident Evil 7 above Outlast Outlast 2. I think it's a much better option. But Resident Evil 7 did this by having this sort of supernatural type of power. We saw this in the original Outlast, which is why I said the original Outlast was able to manage this type of helplessness or ludonarrative dissonance where you aren't fighting back, because you're going up against literally insurmountable odds. Odds that you could never overcome, because you're dealing with essentially supernatural, above natural powers. The giant pig-faced dude, that's a dude that is so powerful that there's no real way to deal with him. And if you get close to him, he will pick you up. You can grab his hands or slap at him. He don't care. Honey Badger don't care. He don't care. And so you end up with something that you can justify in your mind's space. You can, in your mind's eye, you can say, okay, yeah, no, I can see why that is working the way it is. In Outlast 2, you're going up against some, people who have yet to undergo gender reassignment surgery and some really, really angry Baptist preachers. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be able or couldn't just grab that pitchfork and go and stab some people. There's no reason why that isn't. It's never established. So that's something that consistently bugged me, is that ludonarrative dissonance. I've made videos on that. I've discussed it on the podcast. And it's something that really did bug me. But I could suppose I could forgive it if the narrative was great. And if the narrative was so good that I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, no, the combat, whatever, non-existent combat, doesn't make any sense. But the narrative is so good and engaging that it's really good. I'm going to offer some spoilers here. So if you really still are interested in the game or haven't played it yet, I recommend that you don't watch this, that you click away at this point. Consider this kind of our midpoint. You've been warned. I'm going to kind of get into some spoilers. The game is very, very subtle, I guess you could say. It's convoluted. It's very convoluted, and it doesn't try to tell you the story directly. A lot of people play through the game and ask, what did this have to do with the original Outlast? And to find that out, you have to look in some of these notes that you find, some of these transcripts that you find, and then you can piece it together. Basically, the Murkoff Corporation was doing all sorts of tests with radioactive emissions and with radio towers and all this, and it's implied that basically the Murkoff Corporation had some experiment or something that was causing these people to go insane. And they went crazy, killed a bunch of people, and that's why it's a cult. Now, I think this game could have been really good if it hadn't been burdened down by the Outlast name, and if they just embraced, they're like, yeah, you're in Jonestown, like, just make a Jonestown Massacre game. Just do that, where you're trying to escape it. You're a member of the freaking congregation, and you're trying to escape because they're like, drink the Kool-Aid. You're like, no, I won't drink no Kool-Aid. I don't like grape, only cherry. They're like, we only got grape, drink the damn Kool-Aid. And you're like, no. And then you try to escape. That could be really cool. But Outlast 2, there's no, they try to play it close to the Jonestown Massacre, or Johnstown. I can never remember which it is. I think it's Jonestown. But yeah, there's a way to do it, but I think they didn't do it very well. So with that, the Murkoff Corporation is apparently responsible for that, even though they never make a direct sort of appearance. And it's implied that many of the trippy things that you experience are a result of those same sort of waves of radiation or whatever. The flashing lights could be caused by those sort of occurrences. It's possible. It's possible. Again, it's never clearly explained, and they'll probably explain it more in some sort of DLC, but the fact that I can't even piece it together now after the main game is a little frustrating, especially because I need that to justify the entire game that I just played. Now, as many people have said, the game relies on shock and horror in the way, not a great way. They rely on it in a negative way where they're just trying to be gross. And when I've said multiple times on the podcast and live streams, I've said the game it honestly seems like they had a time where they just sat around a table and said, what's the most messed up stuff we can think of? And they said, let's do that. Like, what if you had to walk on top of a bunch of bodies of dead babies? Okay, yeah, we'll put that in the game. Okay, yeah, sure, why not? What if, like, we have a bunch of rapes in the game? Okay, yeah, let's do that. Yeah. What if we had like a weird David Bowie looking transvestite come and lick your face and then kind of dry hump you? Okay, yeah, let's put that in the game. Or what if we had it so there's like cannibalism, but it's not the same cannibalism you're thinking of. It's like this weird feces sort of mixed with chicken and like, okay, yeah, let's put that in the game. It's just going for gross. It's gratuitous. It's just trying to be disgusting for the sake of being disgusting. And it's really disappointing because the first game didn't need to do that. The first game had moments like that, certainly, where you ran into like a cannibal, or you ran into a dude like rubbing one out over a bunch of dead bodies, and it was like, oh my gosh. But those weren't the primary focus of the game. And it wasn't so ham-fisted, I felt. In this game, it's really, really ham-fisted, and it's really just shoved down your throat, no pun intended. And it's many times I was caught just kind of sick as opposed to scared. And many people have drawn that distinction. They've said the game Outlast 2, it's gross, it's not scary, it's gross. So if you're into that sort of psychological, gross, disgusting type of horror, maybe this is the game for you. But it's really, it doesn't do it well as many horror movies have done, for instance. It just does it gross. And there are many times, like you have all these flashbacks with this little Catholic schoolgirl, and it's implied that maybe she's being beaten or maybe she's being raped or something. And so you just leave her alone. And then it's like, oh, you have a flashback. And then she killed herself. But no, she didn't kill herself. Oh, but now she's hung herself. No, she didn't hang herself. She's fine. But no, now she's been beaten to death. She's got choke marks. And it's just trippy. And it's never explained to the point where you can make sense of it. So it seems like they just were like, they had some sort of weird fetish for killing off a bunch of innocent young women. And that brings me to probably the big thing, which is the original Outlast. I made a video on this saying that horror games seem to be a little sexist recently. And I have no problem with that, actually. I think sexism in many ways is a natural reaction. Because men are protective of women, and I don't see anything inherently wrong with that. And in the original Outlast, there were no women, and I was perfectly fine with that. It was just men being gross to other men, doing horrible things. Outlast 2 adds women and children, and with that, they make full use of that. And they said men tend to have like it's been proven in scientific studies, men, and it's one of the reasons that, for instance, women in combat situations for such a long time, it was frowned upon because there were actual studies that showed that men had different reactions to a woman being shot and injured than to one of their bros, to one of their dude friends. And that's apparently a biological, evolutionarily evolved reaction, chemical reaction in the brain, what have you. Whatever it is, it's something that's natural, it's something that happens. And as a result, Outlast 2, the developers said, let's make full use of that. So let's have a bunch of women go through horrible, horrible stuff. Let's have her get raped. Let's have her give birth. And then let's have her just die right there. And then let's have this happen and that happen and all this. And they make full use of it. And I would say it probably works because many times I was like, it shook me up and I was not okay with it. The voice acting was really good in many instances. And it makes me think even more and agree even more with my original premise, which was that sexism in horror and in horrible instances, I think is okay. I don't want to see a bunch of women massacred and raped and all of that. I don't want to see that. Now, does that mean I want to see men raped or murdered or anything? No, but it has more weight to me at least. I'm not a woman, so maybe women have more of a reaction like that to men. That's not what I've generally heard from the women I've talked to about this game and about horror in general. But men tend to be much more protective of women. And so in that instances, and of course children as well, and infants and babies, and you hear crying and there's a visceral response. It's an actual hardwired response in the brain to a baby's crying, that you have a reaction to that. And there's many cases where the game uses that. So the game works. This kind of sums it all up. The game works as a horrible, horrifying experience. It is horrifying. It is atrocious. It is terrible. It's gross. It's violent. It's sticky. It's oozy. It's whatever you want to call it. Does that make it a good game? No. So that's where this big distinction comes down to. That's where all of this comes down to, where you have to make a decision as a consumer. Are you looking for something that is truly horrifying and horrible and terrifying and gross? If you are, then this is what you need. It's like an interactive, the most horrifying interactive horror movie you can imagine. And then if you're looking for like an engaging video game, and then kind of the horror second to that, this is not for you. This is a ham-fisted attempt at a sort of horrifying terror thing. They kept all the bad stuff from Outlast 1, like the camera. We have to film crap, they could have fixed this in so many ways. Even if, like in the Resident Evil 7, your freaking hand gets chopped off because a woman attacks you with a chainsaw. They could have easily done that. Something like that, where you like reaching for your wife, you hallucinate and you see your wife in a chasm or through a doorway, and you reach for her, and all of a sudden some dude cuts your arm off. And then, like, you pass out from the pain. You wake up, and he's bandaged it up and, like, kisses it. And it's really gross and creepy. It's like, I'll see you later, my love. And then you go off, and wanders off. And then you have to go through the rest of the game with a nub and your camera. And the only way you can see in the dark is with the camera. All of a sudden, the fighting back stuff is fixed. Because you're like, oh, I can only see with this video camera. Okay, that makes sense. But every other time in the game, I've got two hands. I can hold this to see where I'm going, and I have a pitchfork. Why can't I do that? It makes no sense. Easily fixed solutions, or easily fixed problems, simple solutions are out there, but they are so weirdly opposed to them, and I'm frankly a little disappointed in how the game turned out. I personally, as I said, if you're looking for a good game, I do not recommend this. I recommend Resident Evil 7. It allows combat, allows fighting back. It allows greater immersion. I think it's really, really well done. This game, not so much. I think this was a swing and a miss. I think they misunderstood what made the original game so great, and that really, at least for me, is heartbreaking because I love the original so much. Maybe they'll make a third one. I'm sure they made bank on the second one, and if they do, I hope they go back to their roots and make something really terrifying but also engaging as a video game. But that's all I have to say on the game. I want to hear your thoughts. If you want to join my Discord, links will be in the description box below. You can join up. Just like say, hey, I just watched your Outlast 2 long-winded review. Here are my thoughts. You can chat me up and we'll talk directly about it. We'll have a great time. I really enjoy talking with you guys, and that's a great way to do it. Also, Twitter. I go live on Twitch and on YouTube. That's a great way to know when those are going up. And if you're considering supporting me on Patreon, right, I can't point. Apparently, this is my Patreon right here. If you want to check that out as well, I would be eternally grateful. But that's all I have to say on Outlast 2. I'm glad to be done with this video game. I kind of want to go and play Stardew Valley now. Just completely decompress with a game like that. But thank you for watching. I love you all. Peace out.